Hey, it's Josiah. On today's episode of Fruitless, I was joined by returning guest Phil Christman. If you've been listening to Fruitless for a while, you may remember all the way back in, I think it was 2022, I had Phil on the show to discuss his essay collection, Midwest Futures. It was a fun episode, and I threw it in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to it. You may also know Phil Christman from his appearances on the podcast Know Your Enemy, which are all great. He's an incredibly thoughtful and interesting writer, and his two essay collections, Midwest Futures and How to Be Normal, are both favorites of mine. He's also got another book available for pre-order right now called Why Christians Should Be Leftists, and there's a link for that in the show notes as well. But on today's episode, Phil joined me to talk about Neil Postman's classic of media ecology, Amusing Ourselves to Death. This was one of those books that made me the type of annoying that I am today. I read it as a college freshman and got obsessed with it, and I'd been itching to revisit it when Phil Christman announced on his Substack that he was planning to revisit the media ecologist, starting off with Postman. So I reached out, and here we are. This was a really fun discussion that gets into the broad intellectual trajectory of Postman's writing and why this book specifically remains ever prescient, despite some of Postman's excesses. I hope you enjoy it. But before we go on with the episode, I do need to say that you can support this show on Patreon. For a mere $3 a month, you get access to an entire back catalog of exclusive episodes. I think we just hit 40 Patreon episodes, so if you've been a free listener all this time, there's a lot of fun stuff to go back on. Recent episodes on the show, however, have included a discussion with my friend Nathan Thiessen about my recent conversion to being a sports guy who watches sports, as well as the most recent installment of The Music Exchange. That's a series where Fruitless's resident metalhead Josh Christensen and I exchange an album that's personally meaningful to us and then compare and contrast them. This most recent installment was focused on the theme of Christofascism, and we discuss Plagues Upon Plagues by Sect and The Body, the Blood, the Machine by the Thermals. On top of great episodes like that, there's also the periodic deleted scene from a main feed episode, including a few short tangents from this very episode here, so that's pretty neat. And on top of all of that, you get access to the Fruitless Discord, so pretty good deal, I think, and it is a mere $3. All right. With that exhausting sales pitch out of the way, let's get on with the episode. You are listening to Fruitless, a podcast hosted by me, Josiah Sutton. This is episode 60, Amused to Death, featuring Phil Christman. Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Fruitless. I am joined by Phil Christman. Hello.
Hey everybody, what's up? How are we doing?
Hey. Yeah, and maybe quickly, if anybody's not super familiar with you, what's your deal?
Man, I wish I knew. Well, I guess most of the writing I've done that people would know about, if anybody knows about it, was sort of, you could call it cultural criticism, I guess. Mm-hmm. My first book is Midwest Futures that came out about 5 years ago. That's a sort of short cultural history of the Midwest. And my second book is How to Be Normal, which is a collection of essays that came out 3 years ago. And then I got a new book which is coming out in September, which we'll talk about. I'll plug it at the end.
Hell yeah.
I have a newsletter like everybody else.
Yeah, it's a good Substack though. It is.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, of course, yeah, you've been pretty influential on my thinking on a lot of stuff. When I first started Fruitless, the first episode we ever did was on the Midwest, and we talked a lot about Midwest Futures. So,
thanks.
Yeah.
You and I have talked before, but I didn't know. I didn't know you considered. I just thought of us as old Twitter buddies. I didn't know I was an influence comments on your
No, yeah, absolutely.
That's exciting.
I love your work. So, but yeah, and so I've already been kind of thinking a bit about Neil Postman, the media ecologists. When you happened to post on Substack a month or two ago that you're going to revisit the media ecologists, and specifically Neil Postman. And so yeah, I reached out and was like, let's do an episode on Amusing Ourselves to Death, because it's a book I've been thinking about, for years now. So I'm excited to get into that. So what led you to go on that kind of kick on Substack here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always been like, this is a group of writers I've always been really interested in. I've been into Postman for decades. I foist him on my friends. I actually, Walter Ong is another. He's also considered part of the kind of media ecology, I don't know, movement, tendency, like whatever we want to call it.
Sure.
He's if you get into media ecology, you're gonna read Ong, and if you don't read Ong, you're gonna encounter his ideas so much through Postman.
Yeah, he comes up.
Yeah, constantly, rightly, because he's a genius. But I make my freshmen read excerpts from Ong's Orality and Literacy as a way
cool.
of just positioning, like, whoa, this is what we do. This is what is special in particular about writing. And these are also some reasons why, writing isn't the be all end all. You should neither take it for granted nor see it as the only way that humans have ever been smart.
Sure. Yeah.
They're kind of always, these thinkers are kind of always in the background of my thinking. And then just, I don't know, thinking so much about the media environment we're in, and what role it played in our descent into fascism, which I must now phrase in the past tense.
Oh God.
I don't mean that.
It's true.
In a fatalistic way, like, oh well, we're screwed now. There's nothing to do but sit around and die. I really, really don't believe that, and I actually think our enemies are pretty soft. But for the moment, that's Donald Trump is president.
Yeah,
and he actually straight up won this time.
Popular vote and everything. Yeah,
the popular vote.
You mentioned you were at a protest against Tesla this morning, right?
Yeah, that is where I just came from.
It feels very fitting leading into this conversation.
Yeah. No real cool stories about it, except that I mistimed everything about my day, and so I already had to pee when I got there. So then you're just walking back and forth in front of a Tesla showroom in the suburbs, for a couple hours, and I'm just how old am I and how long can I do this, also I stopped at Staples to like buy some cardboard so I could make a sign. Because the last couple times I've done it, I always forget to bring a sign because I hate signs. I hate protests. I wish I didn't have to do them. I don't. It's not a fear thing. I mean, the likelihood. I mean, yeah, it's true that like every so often, like some psycho decides to drive into a crowd or you get harassed, but like that, the likelihood of that happening to you as an individual is pretty low. And whatever. They're part of fighting our current situation is embracing some things that are very cringe, and I think protests are extremely cringe. I hate the aesthetics. I hate the chants. I find the chants offensive. So I never remember to bring a sign, but it was like I've got some time this morning. So I stopped at Staples, and I'm like, I should be able to just grab a marker off the rack. And I accidentally grabbed this marker that's like okay, so apparently the dry erase people also make markers that you're supposed to like dip in paint.
Oh, what?
So I buy my poster board, I buy my marker, I go outside, I put the poster board on top of a trash can so I can write my slogan was very clever. This was total Noel Coward shit. Oh, can I swear on your podcast?
Oh yeah, totally, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, it's some of my best work. It was fuck Musk.
There we go.
Very sophisticated. And yeah, so I get the marker out of the wrapping, and then I couldn't write with it. So then I'm carrying this giant piece of poster board to the protest I'm walking to, that's like 2 miles away. And I'm like, hopefully I'll just, God will send a marker. The Lord will send a marker. And I stopped at this coffee shop, and the guy had a marker. So that
sounds like a fun
adventure.
morning.
This was my morning. Anyway, yeah. Sorry, you didn't ask for like the world's dumbest shaggy dog story. You asked.
No, it's fine. I mean, so it kind of brings us back to like, so when I first read Amusing Ourselves to Death was, I think, the last time Postman kind of felt like he was back in the zeitgeist for a bit, which was 2016. It was the beginning of the Trump administration. And I was a college freshman at that time. So it was
How did we lobotomize ourselves as a society so completely,
Yeah, that was like, because in 2016, that was when, or early 2017, that was when we were getting hit with that question. And we're just doing it over again, this time as farce, whatever. But yeah, I mean, at the time, I remember reading it and being like taken aback, because that introduction, talks about, we elected a movie star as president, and being taken aback as like a college freshman, because I'm like, wait, does this come out? Oh, right. It's talking about Reagan. And it was like one of those. And the
cultural declension is that we elected a movie star as president, and then we elected a reality show host as president.
Yeah.
And when I think about, okay, so what, if anything, has changed from 1980? I think it's partly about there's less aspiration in the type of fantasy figure you're electing. Remember?
Because Reagan was a cowboy, or played a cowboy.
He played a cowboy. I mean,
right, and there was still an aspiration of this, like, this dignified cowboy we're electing as president. As it's like, no, this is bottom of the barrel reality TV stuff. Reagan played a cowboy. Reagan played a romantic hero. He played a war hero. He played, a kind of like heroic, football player, and he played a nice man. His policies were evil. Yeah. Absolutely, just heinous, I mean, I was a kid, but when I got old enough to read a couple books and find out what I had been supporting as an 8-year-old, like just straight up murdering people supporting the democratically elected governments of Latin American countries, and I was shocked and ashamed. Absolutely.
Never got over it. He was an evil. His ideology was evil. He was just kind of foggy brain. I mean, he was an evil man in a sense, but it's almost like evil was a vessel that things passed through, including evil. I read a Reagan biography when I was doing Midwest Futures, and he was a good FDR liberal. And that's the origin story that's always told is that then he ran the Actors Union, and the communists tried to take it over, and were, these are Stalinists, like they were their classy selves. Like they probably really were terrible, and definitely played hardball. And so then he got mad, and then he hooked up with Nancy Davis, whose dad is like a small business fascist. And then that was it. But he still felt some need to, like, he tried to pose as your commonsensical grandpa when he was selling you. Yeah.
He's giving you wisdom and truisms and
homespun stuff. And the guy he was playing is a guy who you may think he's a little right wing, but he'll help you fix your car. Now, in reality, do I think Ronald Reagan would do that? No. In reality, if I'm picking between Reagan and Carter, who's going to have my back in a fight, I'm actually picking spindly little Jimmy Carter, who actually was a soldier. Which Reagan,
Yeah, absolutely.
Reagan was a PR soldier. But there's an aspirational component. There's a, like, even when he's inviting you to be part of something smaller than yourself, he makes it sound like he's inviting you to be part of something bigger than yourself. Donald Trump never, ever, ever does that, because a reality TV show star doesn't do that. Like, reality TV show stars are like Big Ed, from 90 Day Fiance, or they're aspirational in that I wish I could let my id run that free. I wish I could look that stupid, and everybody still has to pretend I don't look stupid.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it feels like, and I think this is why a lot of people were returning to Postman in 2016, 2017, was just this. Trump is a better reflection of Postman's thesis than Reagan was, even. Not that Reagan wasn't on some degree something that Postman was able to describe, but like, yeah, Trump just felt like the perfect embodiment of this exact thing.
Which is, like, to say that writ a little bit larger, people keep reading Postman because stuff keeps happening to make Postman look prophetic.
Yeah.
You read this book that is very much about, is just straightforwardly about television, which no longer feels like the central, threat to our epistemological equipment at all. But everything just feels like it's, completing Postman's sentence, including the stuff that he didn't foresee.
Yeah, I think a lot of the critics of television, of a video culture from the 80s and 90s have aged really well. And it's weird that I think a lot of people have gotten in their head that they've aged poorly, because it's like, oh, we're in such a so past that it feels quaint. But I mean, especially with like these filmmakers that I return to, like Cronenberg or Michael Haneke, when they were making stuff from that time, I like, all of that stuff feels relevant now to the internet era, even though it was technically about video, Yeah,
which, speaking of the media ecologists and how inescapable they are, if you have these concerns, if you're not familiar with that term or whatever, if you've seen Cronenberg's Videodrome, which is like, as ugly and disturbing as that film is, that is the Cronenberg film to see.
It absolutely is.
Brilliant.
I have to show off that I have a Long Live the New Flesh t-shirt on right now.
How did I not even see that that's what you're wearing?
Well, I was kind of cropped, so yeah. I'm a huge fan of that movie. One of my favorites.
It's a great movie. But the character Brian Oblivion, as you definitely know, but I'm just saying this for the audience, like that's Marshall McLuhan. That's David. That's David Cronenberg's little like joke tribute to Marshall McLuhan.
Yeah, it's that movie was so fun when I first saw it, because I was, at least passingly familiar with McLuhan, and it's so on the nose with its references. Like, the classic McLuhan thing is a tool is an extension of the body, right? So like, hammer's an extension of hand. There's the iconic scene where he's holding the gun, and it starts to like insert itself and become part of his hand. It's like a literal visual motif to like
the gut VHS player in that movie is the one that I can never get, stick the videotape inside yourself. Yeah.
It's
Good
incredible.
Old Cronenberg.
I love Cronenberg. Yeah. So, of course, Postman has been a really, really influential thinker on me, because I think he was one of the first people to kind of make me take seriously, like, broadly philosophy of technology, but then specifically like really interrogating on a philosophical or theoretical level, like what our media environment is like. And especially, at the age I am, I've grown up entirely pretty much in this like digital environment. And so Postman was like somebody kind of like, let's deconstruct that and actually ask what it's doing to you.
Yeah. So I realized I haven't like had so far in this conversation, there hasn't been a moment where I'm like defining my terms for people who aren't familiar with the topic. What is media ecology in a nutshell? I think one way to think about it is that it's taking the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis about language. Language is not just the vehicle of thought, but the driver. And I got to put a huge asterisk next to that. But it's taking that idea and then saying, well, what if this what if this is also like true of the media through which we, use language, basically. If I take the same sentence and I paint it on a billboard, write it, tattoo it on my knuckles, say it in conversation, say it on TikTok, say it on the radio. What if those are not all the same thing? Like, what if media is not, what if media are not fully transparent, but actually like, the thing you put the supposed content into actually shapes the content. And how much is that true? Does it determine the content? Which Postman and McLuhan, partly because I think they're just naturally kind of polemical writers who are trying to be memorable. They will definitely overstate things, and they will make that relationship sound totally determinist, which makes them more memorable as writers and makes them easier to follow, and also gives people an invitation to dismiss what they're saying, because that's just I don't think that's true. I don't know. I mean, it feels like a continuum, and I don't know what the exact spot is on the continuum between like media are transparent and media totally determined. But, to the point where there is no content. But, we exist somewhere on that continuum. And this is a group of writers of which Neil Postman is probably like... Postman is the Bowie. If we could liken media ecology to glam rock, Postman is David Bowie. Everybody knows about him. Everybody loves him. He reinvents himself a lot. His stuff's really fun, even when you're going, McLuhan is Roxy music. He's for connoisseurs.
Yeah. He's for the real heads.
He's for the real heads. I guess Harold Innis is the Canadian academic Harold Innis would then be like, he's Mark Bolan. He didn't live that long.
Sure.
So we don't know what he was capable of. And then Walter Ong would be the other major figure, but I can't think of another glam rock band to compare Walter Ong to. So there we are. But and the important asterisk about all that is like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, according to like what I've read, is like
kind of bullshit.
Yeah, it's wild overstatement. Wild overstatement.
Yeah, I almost think that there's more potency to that hypothesis applied to media, like the media ecologists do, than I do because there's like very literal ways in which media does change the content that's being, as Postman I think does a good job. I mean, as he talks about, there's like a kind of a throwaway chunk of Amusing Ourselves to Death is him, mentioning that, you can't really have a ventriloquist on radio, right? Like that's a very literal example. Way, it's just a very literal way that the medium affects the message, Yeah,
he has some other really good examples like that. And apparently they did used to have tap dancers on the radio.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me because you could cheat so easily.
Yeah.
Look, I'm a tap dancer on the radio.
Yeah, that came up in an example where he's talking about attempts to make television more important or profound. Is he's like, it's similar to when I would hear people try to do a ventriloquist on radio. It's like no one,
yeah, you can do really it, work. But it's everybody thinks it sucks. And yeah, so to just get like the basics of the basic claims of this book, Amusing Ourselves to Death out there. So I think if you ask people who have kind of vaguely heard of this book or have read it carelessly or are just like, trying to quickly pinpoint it, people will say it's an anti-television book. And his actual argument's a little more nuanced than that. It's an having serious conversations about shit that actually matters.
Yeah, I think that's actually his more trollish kind of moment is when he's like, no, I'm not criticizing junk on TV. I love it when it's junk on TV. What I don't like is when we pretend important political discourse can happen on TV. Yeah.
Television, TV is great for, I guess watching Bugs Bunny cartoons on, although I would not call that junk, just to be clear.
Yeah,
that's great American art. That's like right up there with Miles Davis. But yeah, television is, I mean, it's funny that the book is called Amusing Ourselves to Death because he doesn't really object to television as a way to amuse ourselves. He objects to it as a way to have the conversations that a democracy has to have.
Yeah.
He objects to it as a way of presenting news, for example, and even there he's a little ambiguous. He says something. He talks about what was then the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour, and then later it was the News Hour with Jim Lehrer, and I think aren't those guys both dead now? I
think so.
I don't mean to be a dick, but yeah, they'd be very, very old. But
Yeah.
it was PBS's flagship news show for a long time, and when I was a kid. And he doesn't say that it sucks. He says that nobody watches it.
Well, this is a potent argument, I think, because I think you could always be like, well, look at these examples of these educational television things or whatever. And it's like,
nobody watches it.
but like you compare that to the ratings of like what in the 90s, the Simpsons, everyone's watching that. Before we get a little farther into amusing ourselves to death, though, something you were writing about on Substack was kind of Postman's intellectual trajectory getting here, is there's a lot of Postman before we get here.
Yeah,
so could you say a little bit about how we got to amusing ourselves to death?
Right. This is his big breakout book, and read it. This was the third or fourth time I've read it. And reading it this time, what really struck me is how incredibly calculated to be I don't say any of this critically, but calculated to be a breakout successful nonfiction book this is.
Yeah, this guy's written a lot of books prior to this. You can kind of tell. He knows what he's doing.
What he's doing. Yeah. His opening chapter is the kind of thing that makes agents salivate. He could write a book proposal, which is something that I'm terrible at. There's at least two people listening to this who know that this is true. My editor at Bell, my editor god awful at it because I write to figure things out, But so his first book comes out in I think 1961, and it's called something really nondescript like television and the classroom or something. It's an act of professional service. So Postman is like probably one of the smartest people to ever get an education PhD. And he was like teaching people how to be English teachers for a few years. And then he gets invited back to NYU pretty early in his career and makes his home there. He's there for decades and decades. And yeah, his first book is an act of professional, guild service it's published by NCTE, the National Council of Teachers of English, which is, the professional organization for 4-year and 2-year college English teachers. I think high school English teachers join too. Anyway. And it's this rather, I mean, even in that book, it's not like without interest. It still has some amount of personality.
Sure.
But it's basically just a guide for how to incorporate television into your English classroom. It's like for, middle and high school teachers.
Which is wild.
Given his reputation, it's crazy. It's like if RFK Jr. used to be I don't know, not brain damaged. It's like
he used to be doing
shots guy.
Yeah, used to be like pro vaccine or whatever.
yeah. No, it's nuts. Although it's not as nuts as you'd think, because he doesn't mind television as entertainment. And what he's mostly doing in that book is talking about the first golden age of television, as historians call it, which is the period in the 1950s when they were just doing 90-minute and 60-minute plays every night. You would just turn on the TV and it would be like very snowy theater.
Yeah.
And often live and we can't go back and watch a lot of this stuff because it wasn't preserved. so I have no idea how good it was, but some pretty serious writers did a lot of it. Stuff by Patty Chayefsky, Gore Vidal wrote a lot of this stuff. And he seems to sort of respect that as its own art form. And then he talks about having children analyze genre through the lens of the Western and stuff like that. Yeah. So I mean that book's mostly interesting as a time capsule. And then he wrote a couple of textbooks which I wasn't able to actually get a hold of. From what I was able to read about them, it sounds like he was really interested in using linguistics as sort of the basis for English education. For the classroom, which those of you who are English teachers, our discipline is fundamentally incoherent in a way that few other equally important academic disciplines are. English is an ongoing argument about what it means to study English.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, so he was trying to answer that question using linguistics. Is what I think was going on with those books. And then his first sort of trade book that anyone would have, that you would like go to the books, a normal person could go to the bookstore and buy, is Teaching as a Subversive Activity from 1969, which is, it's kind of like Frere for Americans, like before
Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Pedagogy of the Oppressed. He basically agrees with Frere that that the content, worrying about trying to teaching people things is wrong. Basically, the idea, Frere has this famous. I'm a Frere hater.
You are? I didn't know that.
I'm going to piss some people off. I for a number of reasons, but one of which is just I read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and I feel like I at no point got an account of what he actually does in the classroom. I feel like most of what I read was him saying, "Here's how the thing that I do fits in with this person's Marxist theory of change that was presented at this Marxist conference in this year. And here's how what I'm doing fits in with this Catholic thing that the Catholics said at this Catholic." It's like, what do you actually do, bro? Tell me what you do. But the other reason is that, I don't know, I think it's okay to tell people stuff that they don't know. And I think it is okay to tell yourself that is what you are doing. Like, I know this thing, you don't know it. You could benefit from knowing it, so I'm telling it to you. And Frere, the way he makes his argument, as I remember it, there's if you think you're doing that, you're banking. He has this famous thing about the banking model of education, which is where you take your thoughts from your head,
you insert it.
And no, my thoughts are transformed as I share them with you and as you receive them. So that already doesn't work. I just, that drives me crazy. And Postman, this is a couple of years before that book was at least translated into English. Postman seems to have arrived there independently. In Teaching as a Subversive Activity, he straight up says, that thinking about course content is ridiculous. He makes fun of the idea of course content. It's like, well, what do you want us to do instead, Neil? I want you to do things that are relevant to these kids. He uses it's such a 60s book. He uses relevant as this God term. Nothing. I don't know. I'm very allergic to the word relevant because I've just seen it used to take nice things away from people and dumb everything down.
Well, I mean, and arguably that's later on in Postman's perspective, he would agree.
That's totally where Postman ends up.
That's where he goes. Yeah.
But So he wrote that book along with a guy named Charles Weingartner. And then he wrote a couple other books that are just kind of part of the deschooling movement. Of the late 60s, early 70s, which is deschooling was kind of founded on this fear that K-12 education was working too well and making people, and that what people were really learning from it was how to be an obedient little automaton who knows who knows too many facts and who learns, too much content too good. That your head is too good of a receptacle for all those banked thoughts from teachers. And I look at reading scores now, and I'm like, God, we thought that was a problem.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
That's the terrifying. Like, it blows my mind as much that people are worried about that being the result of schooling in the 60s as the fact that, like, I can't believe 2, 3, 4 years ago, the big concern for a lot of, like, not just conservatives, but even liberals was, oh my goodness, we're too woke and we're too intolerant of rape and sexual abuse and things are going to, like, I look back and I'm like, what a lost paradise that we thought that was our problem, And that's how I feel when I read the deschoolers. But there's a huge carryover, even from this period into Postman's later, more conserving period, which is he's already really influenced by by Marshall McLuhan. I mean, I think of them together. He's already really influenced by McLuhan. And his big critique of the classroom is that it's teaching sit and think and be obedient, or sit and listen and be obedient, that the form of the classroom is teaching that, and that's why the content isn't even worth worrying about, that the form of the classroom teaches that in such a way that even if the content of all your lessons don't conform, that the only thing kids are learning is sit and obey. And so he becomes less convinced that is what's happening in classrooms as he gets older. In 1979, he writes Teaching as a Conserving Activity, which is a very funny and entertaining book. And it sort of previews the arguments of his next several books. And there's like a handful of, like, just completely batshit insane statements in it. And that's just going to be every Neil Postman book from now on. He's good
at that, yeah.
Brilliant, interesting, funny, aphoristic, worth reading, absolutely. Are there going to be 5 or 6 paragraphs where you're just like, this man is a lunatic? Yes.
I especially because I don't remember if we were recording when I had mentioned I got a chance to also read Technopoly before this, and that one I think brought that out of me more, is like, because I knew the arguments of amusing ourselves to death going in a lot more. As Technopoly, it's like, we're going after the stethoscope now. Like,
yeah, he does. There's one point where he sounds like he's mad about the stethoscope. One of the things that kind of, I mean, I think this helps make him a memorable writer, but I also find it personally, like, very frustrating. Is that I definitely get the impression that Postman is a guy. He's one of those guys who will, like, wildly overstate something, and he'll totally commit to it in order to make a point. And then later, when you come back to him and you're like, but you hated on the stethoscope for like a page and a half. He's like, I wasn't saying you can't have stethoscopes.
No. And I mean, and it's true. Like in it, he's saying, like, well, this is what caused these changes and changed the relationship in the medical environment. I get that. But, like, he doubles down so hard sometimes that it, like, it could be just kind of baffling, where, I think in Technopoly, he goes after, like, the invention of the telescope as well. Right. And, like, the formation of astronomy as a thing. But then later on, and in that it challenged the Christian tradition. And then later on is like, but I don't like creationists. And so it's kind of like, his heart is with the Enlightenment.
Yes. Isn't his last full book Building a Bridge to the 18th Century?
I think so. Yeah.
I think that's the last one, which it's fine. I mean, that book comes out in the early W. Bush era, and I feel like, I mean, if you went to college or grad school in the humanities in the 90s, early 2000s, you were just sort of, like, wound up to blame the Enlightenment for everything bad that ever happened in human history. And so, yeah, as counter emphasis, that book is probably useful and interesting to have. It's not his best work. I mean, just to give a quick illustration of the rest of his trajectory, his after teaching as a conserving activity, which I think that's the book to read if you want the as much of the total Postman map as you can get, because he talks about he talks about everything that he's gonna talk about in all his later books, briefly there. And it's also just, it's funny, it's salty. But then he writes a book called The Disappearance of Childhood that comes out in 82. And that really relates to the attack, his later attack on television, because the basic argument of that book is, and this is, I think that this is this argument is genuinely nuts, but it's also fascinating and memorable. He says that the reason childhood is disappearing is because the childhood as we've known it was created by mass literacy. You create a child by keeping secrets from them, and electronic media is giving all the secrets away. And that's right. The argument.
So what? It's like darker, rougher aspects of life get talked about in newspapers or whatever, and kids can't read. But then now it's being talked about on the news, overheard by the kids, and now they're aware of war, death, whatever.
The lurid 80s talk shows are a big part of his argument. You're homesick from school and you turn on Sally Jesse Raphael. You're going to learn what incest is. You're gonna learn about, I don't know, recreational blood drinking, whatever crazy. You can watch the news and see, atrocities happening. He's very concerned about the sexualization of children, which, good. Yeah, he's right.
That's a bad thing.
You should be worried. And he's right. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about that book is that he's writing in the 70s. It comes out in 82, but he was obviously working on it from the late 70s on. And he kind of captures a moment when the sort of sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s has not yet met the natural human horror at sexualizing children. The 70s and early 80s is a really creepy moment in cultural history. Looking back, kind of the high watermark of what was getting normalized at that moment is things like Woody Allen's character having a relationship with Marielle Hemingway's character in Manhattan, and she's like a junior or senior in high school, and he's Woody Allen, and he's 42, and turns out life was going to imitate art there if it wasn't already. But also the mass tolerance of, or not even tolerance, but the idea that if a rock star shows up in your town and has sex with a bunch of 15 and 16-year-olds, those girls are bad and made a bad choice, but he's just doing what guys do, which I'm no, I don't know. Ugh. Yeah. So Postman is able to pick up on a bunch of examples of just really creepy child sexualization that I think probably wouldn't, the TV commercials and stuff that I think wouldn't fly today.
So in a way he was kind of wrong and more right about that specific moment in history. Yeah. But not about the trajectory of culture overall. Yeah.
And the piece of that book that still completely holds up is that toward the end, he sort of switches tracks a little bit and says, childhood is being eroded on the childhood end, but it's also being eroded on the adult end. We're ending up with a kind of perma-adolescence that kids are pushed into too early, and
that's
that adults
100%
stay.
right. Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah. I'm thinking of at the beginning of this administration, the infamous handful of right-wing tweets or whatever about how this is like if the jocks and the chess club teamed up. It's good Lord, we are not living in a world of 80s high school cliques.
Yeah. I mean, I used to feel like I was, still too stuck on or influenced by the amount of bullying that I experienced as a kid. And then the real men took back America and showed me that I have not yet even begun to obsess over the amount of bullying that I experienced. Like, when I was in middle school and high school, I did not think about getting bullied in middle school and high school as much as these 50-year-old men think about getting bullied in middle high school. It is ridiculous. It is pathetic. And it grips all of us to some extent. I mean, I don't mean to pick on anybody who has ever congratulated themselves for adulting, because I have to do that. Phone calls turn me into such a wimp, and it's
sure, I'm terrible at keeping up with laundry, with daily life stuff. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like, what happened? How did 18-year-olds win World War II and I'm me, like what happens? Maybe it's not, I don't think it's, speaking of adultifying children, I don't think it's good that 18-year-olds had to, rid Europe of fascism, but I don't think that's something to aspire to, but like, yeah, where'd the toughness go?
Yeah.
So yeah, like all these books I think are basically worth reading. There's even I even think Teaching is a Subversive Activity has some great stuff in it, but they also all have a crazy component. And then Amusing Ourselves to Death is his next book, and it's why we're still talking about him. And then Technopoly is a little later, and that's his sort of like, you can almost think of that as a manifesto for neo-Ludditism. And I say that as a compliment. Mostly. And then End of Education, which is one of his last books. I just want to mention, because I think people don't, I think it's really good. I don't think it gets enough attention. I think that's a really, really wise book on education that I enjoyed more than I expected to.
Yeah, so that's it's an interesting trajectory, because Postman is a guy that comes out of this like 60s radicalism and then slowly becomes kind of a weird type of conservative. Like I don't want to say conservative that's a term with a lot of baggage, but he's definitely a definitely a technological conservative, and there's a little bit of cultural conservatism, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, and it's really inconsistent, and sometimes I think some of it is just trolling.
He loves doing that.
There's no doubt that he'd be on the side of right, if like he would be a cringe resistance lib. And again, I say that as a compliment. I spent my morning marching with cringe resistance libs. I'm very thankful for them.
I 100%, because Trump represents everything he hates. So even if he's got this so even if he was a guy that would have been like irritated at quote wokeness or whatever, I still imagine he wouldn't love what's going on.
He would hate what's going on from the bottom of his heart. He would be on the right side of a lot of the stuff that matters. But and we know this because he was in his lifetime. But like his trajectory is kind of like thoughtful young member of the establishment, a PhD in ed, who's just like thoughtfully part of his profession and does big acts of professional service, and according to every testimonial I could find, a wonderful teacher, always a wonderful teacher. And then I don't know, by the end of the 60s, he kind of feels a little bit like Howard Beale in Network to me. It's like a member of the establishment who listened to the hippie song just long enough to go a little crazy. So he's crazy, but he's still kind of got a bow tie on. And then after that, he's basically what I would want the right end of the political spectrum to be. Like in my perfect world, the political spectrum runs from like Neil Postman, Alan Jacobs, Jeffrey Hill, they're as far right as you can go, because those are just like thoughtful dudes who write good and are inclined to ask are we throwing out the baby with the bathwater? Which I don't
Which
think
is the better end of conservatism, broadly. Yeah. Is
you
that
should
question?
ask yourself that. I ask myself that, and yeah, that's just where it would end. That's where the spectrum ends, and we don't live in that world.
Yeah, I think Postman is like a good type of conservative because he is, a critic of progress for progress's sake as just like a given, or that social and cultural progress necessarily comes out of technological progress, which, I think that's a criticism that has aged like a fine wine.
Yep.
As we see the increasingly more reactionary sides of Silicon Valley or whatever taking power, But so diving into like going back to amusing ourselves to death here, specifically, you had mentioned that this book opens with like the perfect pitch. Which it is, right? Which is the stuff about Huxley and Orwell, right? Which is the most memorable thing.
like the last sentence of the prologue is something like, this book proposes what this book. It's almost like that much memed scene in Royal Tenenbaums. What this book presupposes is what this book presupposes is that we picked the wrong dystopia to worry about, basically. Like Huxley and not Orwell was right. We have worried about living in 1984 world, and we have backed ourselves, like while we were worried about that, we backed ourselves into Brave New World. I mean, it's so memorable, and especially in a book published in the year 1985. So he has that great opening that's like, we were all watching for 1984,
are we gonna do it?
Yeah. It's beautifully done, and you can just see an agent salivating. And I was reading it when I had just had some trouble trying to pitch someone I know about an essay collection, and I was reading and I was like, oh, why can't I do shit like this? This is so good.
It's so good. I think also it's perfect for a public audience because while it's relying on these like these literary references, they are very like public knowledge literary. These are not obscure. Everyone knows Brave New World in 1984. You probably had to read it in high school.
Yeah. They still make high schoolers read 1984, which and Animal Farm, which I honestly wish they wouldn't, because Animal Farm is like, it's very easy, boring allegory, and this is the guy that wrote Homage to Catalonia. This guy is so good when he's good, and I feel like people subconsciously retain a picture of George Orwell as an author of like extremely on the nose allegories for children,
and specifically anti-communist ones, rather than having some broader criticism of what society should be like.
Wait till you find out what his politics actually were. He was a socialist who didn't like nice things. He was a no luxury, keep your gayness to yourself. No, why do you want to go to space, communist? Like he was a
anti-luxury.
Everybody gets the worst possible shoes and meat that tastes bad because this is England and we love England, don't we, folks? Anyway, Orwell rules. But yeah, it's so Postman starts with two like big, memorable, easy literary references, and then that enables him to write a lot of those the sentences in that opening section as like very nicely balanced. Orwell worries about this, Huxley worries about that. Like even just down to the level of grammar, it's very it's neat. It's like everything is shelved nicely. And I think that's a strength for the not to be really banal, but that is a strength for the book and also a weakness, especially on this. I mean, the first time I read this, I was just like, oh my God, I found
it's like scales falling off your eyes. Yeah.
I think a lot of people have that experience with Postman. And
I know I did.
I mean, I did.
Yeah.
I did really bad. I used to, when anyone would criticize this book in particular, I would get like violently defensive about it. I was like, shut up. When he says that educational television shouldn't be entertaining, and then he's funny and entertaining in a different way. It's not a contradiction.
It's not the same.
Yeah. I would get pedantically defensive of him. Reading it through this time, I was like, oh, these stark, simple dichotomies are going to continue through the book, and they're going to cause him to say a lot of things that I just think, if you pause and think about this, it just isn't true. Hold up.
Yeah.
Isn't true.
Yeah.
Publishers, and what also really struck me about it is like, so if you read like Betsy Lerner's Guide to How to Write a Book Proposal, one of the things she says is never pitch a nonfiction book in terms of turning a dial when you could instead flip a switch. What that means is like, don't say, I'm going to write the most comprehensive biography of, I don't know, Lord Byron. No publisher wants to hear most comprehensive, that's funny to me, because as a reader, that's absolutely what I want to hear.
That's what you want. Yeah.
Like, why would I want to read I don't know if I'm going to bother to read a biography about a person. I don't want no Mickey Mouse shit. Give me the, apparently publishers don't like that language. And that is dial turning language. It's like, there are other books that do this, but I'm going to do it more, and what publishers we're told, I mean, who knows how much of this is ideology and received wisdom, and how much of it is actually like empirically defensible. Because publishing is such a black box. But supposedly what publishers want is a book that flips a switch. Instead of most comprehensive biography of Lord Byron, it's, you thought Lord Byron was this, great poet, but actually he was a disgusting slut. Or you thought Lord Byron was a disgusting, cousin fucking slut. Or no, sister. Was it his sister or half sister? Anyway, you thought Lord Byron was a sick pervert, but actually he was a, 19th century moralist. A book that transforms our understanding. Why? I mean, that just seems to me so obviously like an artificial limitation that I wouldn't want to have on nonfiction publishing if I was building it up from scratch. Why is that a thing? Well, it seems like that would be a thing because it makes books really easy to talk about and sell on radio and television. Like if you're going on NPR, it's easier to explain and make memorable and ultimately sell the book that says, you thought fat was bad for you, but it's good for you. You
rather
thought
than sometimes it's good.
You thought string theory was the hot new theory, but no, it's this.
Right.
It's a fundamentally televisual way to talk about books. And whether Postman was advised to do this or he just naturally hit on it, maybe it's partly about being in the classroom and trying to be memorable, but he's really good at presenting these stark, simple dichotomies and saying, you're worried about this, but you actually need to be worried about that. And he just overcommits to that way too much, and he ends up saying a lot of stuff in passing that you're just like, no, that's crazy. Dumb. What the fuck are you talking about, bro?
I think, toward the beginning of Technopoly, I think he makes a comment that I think kind of shed some light on his thought process in doing this. And it was when talking about the different poles of like technophobia versus technophilia, kind of, right? Where he's like, there are so many technophiles. Like there's so many people that are just pro technological progress. Like I am going to stake out this opposite position, this dissenting position. And so I think in some way that's probably how he justifies it, is he's like, there's such a absence of this position I'm taking that I'm going to take it all the way. So somebody stakes it out. Which
also makes sense intellectually for him, because another one of the through lines that even when he seems to like violently shift like from subversive to conserving, one of the things that runs through like all his writing on education is what he, I think it's in Conserving, teaching is a conserving activity that he explicitly lays this out, but you can always see it. Is the view of educational institutions as thermostatic mechanisms. If it's too hot, you make it a little cooler. If it's too cool, you make it a little hotter. And what that ends up meaning for him is that he's always doing a kind of intellectual homeopathy. Oh, no one's taking a strong Luddite position. Okay, someone needs to then. It's like, I don't know. That's just not how I think. Like this sounds very naive when you lay it out like this, but I want to find the position that is true.
No, I totally get this. And
right.
I've made arguments like that before about like, I'm staking out this position because it's like not taken very often. And I think that it kind of served as a thought terminating cliche in my head personally, just in how I did it. It's more a justification for me not thinking through a position. I'm just taking it because I should, like, as I feel like I should, relative to the discourse.
It's a role that I'm adopting. I mean, I think I partly have an allergic reaction to this because I don't know. I think it's partly personal. I've had a lot of people in my life, especially growing up, who would sort of overstate things because they, like, my dad would like, if he thought I was going too far one way, he would just like make the most insane troll argument on the other side that he could.
Yeah.
And that would have the effect of pushing me further the other way. And then he would be like, why is my kid going crazy? And
yeah.
And then I would come back to him and I'd be like, but Dad, last time we argued about this, you said, this, and he'd be like, I don't think that. I'd be like, why didn't you just say what you thought? I also partly I feel like there's something condescending about that approach. I mean, the fact that I associate it, I'm not trying to like air out my dad here, but the fact that I associate it with my dad, it's like, it's a parental or teacherly move. It's something, it's about having an audience that you don't trust to quite land on the right, sufficiently nuanced spot or like, it's about having an audience that you think you can't just tell them like fully what you think with all the caveats and nuances, and like, I'm stopping at this exact spot on the slippery slope. This is the right spot. This is where the sun is,
Sure.
It's not being able to say that because you don't trust your audience to be smart enough to stop there. So you overdo it in one direction or another because, they're kind of dumb and you have to manipulate them one way. I don't know. It feels like a relationship with your audience where you're afraid to be completely honest with them. And that, I'm very allergic to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, of course, as we get into this book here more, like, Postman's really guilty of this, like you're saying, But to lay out, we kind of mentioned it, but like to lay out exactly his thesis in the book here, it's building off McLuhan. So the idea that technologies are an extension of us and serve as metaphors for how we understand the world. In every technology, there is like some sort of embedded idea in it. And so for him in the 20th century, television became the dominant medium and began to shift our culture out of the previously existing print-based culture. And this has had terrible ramifications for politics, culture, whatever, everything we're in. It's made us less rational. It's made us addicted to entertainment for entertainment's sake.
And it turns everything into entertainment.
Yes. There's a good line about that specifically where he is like, it's not that there's too many entertaining things on TV. It's that TV presents all subject matter as entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah. So his and he kind of goes through thematically, like there's a chapter on how this happens. The format of the book is here's how the thing that you just said happens with this area of our lives. And here, next chapter is here's how it happens with this area of our lives. Here's how it happens with religion. Here's how it happens with politics. Here's how it happens with, I'm filling the blank.
Yeah.
So when the religion chapter, he talks about how basically like the televised Christianity, and of course this is the age of the big
televangelist. Yeah.
This is the age of like not the righteous gemstones, but like
the flashback episodes of Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah, this is John Goodman, and this is Amy Lee. This is Amy Lee and Baby Billy doing their little tap dance. This is that era. This is the Jim Baker, Jerry Falwell, the OGs, and also the era of the big Billy Graham crusades. And he quotes Billy Graham on some TV show saying, that God loves people who make others laugh, and then he says, well, Billy Graham has confused television with God.
Right. Yeah.
Television is the god of televised religion, basically.
Yeah, there's a really interesting comment in that chapter too about why fundamentalist Protestantism is the specific type of Christianity that's going to be most conducive to television.
That plays best, yeah.
And it's because it's the least ritualized, the least liturgical, the least whatever. You can't really replicate like a Catholic liturgy or a divine liturgy or even like an Episcopal service over TV. But you can kind of replicate a fire and brimstone preacher or yeah.
Although I do want to say, I bet if you gave I bet if you brought Andrei Tarkovsky back from the dead, gave him money, he
could do it.
He couldn't replicate it, but he could attempt to replicate divine liturgy and come up with a thing that was interesting in its own right. Anyway, but yeah, no, I mean that's true. You can just sort of start doing entertaining histrionics that are sort of Jesus flavored, and you've got a thing people will watch on television, whether they believe or not. I mean, I've always wondered how much the audience, like the ratings figures for televangelism were swelled by people watching it ironically or out of anthropological fascination. I'm guessing it's like not a negligible number. I definitely knew lots of people who were like Reddit, the Reddit atheist types who loved watching it, like Benny Hinn, all the really crazy shit. They loved watching it because it's wild.
I mean, most people's relationship with reality TV is usually that way. Like everybody, watches it as a quote guilty pleasure or whatever. Like that's how everyone treats it.
I'm fascinated by how stupid everybody is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to see, I want to explore how deep, how wide, how rich stupidity can be.
Yeah. There is like the standard viewer of reality TV is doing it ironically. Yeah, absolutely. The religion chapter is really fascinating. I also really, I think his broader look at like politics is interesting because
there's some really good material in that.
There's some good stuff there. Yeah. I think some of the best stuff kind of comes out of that. I think is the is look at like how political debates function, stuff like that.
Yeah, he has. I mean, so he does some of the things you would expect him to do, like talking about people standing for 4 hours during the Lincoln Douglas debates, and like that this was mass entertainment, et cetera, which of course, any historian could probably come in and knock some holes in that by being like, well, there was nothing else to do. How many people were actually listening? Yeah,
it's fair to say it was more prevalent then than now, though. I think that at least you can say.
I think his point fundamentally stands. Like, inevitably, he talks Nixon, Kennedy in 1960, which I mean, I don't think that's a great. I think people shouldn't. He uses a couple of really goofy examples when he's talking about politics. He talks about Nixon, Kennedy, which like, I'm sorry, I'm glad Kennedy won that election. I wish Alan Dulles hadn't killed him and he'd gotten 2 terms. Disclaimer, I don't know if Dulles killed him or not. I wouldn't put it past him. I don't know. Anyway, but like, and then another example he uses is like 315-pound William Howard Taft could never be president today. And I'm like, good.
Yeah,
Taft sucked. He's a Gilded Age Republican. I hate his guts, and there's a lot of them, like who.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned in Substack that FDR would have been a way better example. Wheelchair-bound FDR not being able to be elected. Yeah,
fucking Giga Chad FDR.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, he's right there. Why didn't you say FDR, you dummy? But anyway, yeah. So some of his examples are goofy, but he also has this. One thing that's valuable about reading Postman, even going all the way back to that first book from 1961, is just like, we forget nothing quicker than we forget the pop culture of last week. The stuff that everybody watched and then everybody forgot about. Like, the texture of that just disappears. He talks about this bizarre roundtable that was broadcast after the first or second airing of the kind of the Gen X classic, like, nightmare TV movie, The Day After, which is like, the Day After is the US version of Threads, and Threads is the UK version of The Day After, but they're just, and Threads is scarier, but they're both just pants-wettingly terrifying docudramas about what a nuclear war would look like. And so he talks about this roundtable where they have a bunch of guys who are just like the perfect intellectuals of not just the television age, but the three networks age. So that's where you have like the fundamental televisual, the fundamental cognitive limits of television, right? Which are things like, stuff has to look cool, or it at least has to look like something. It has to look vaguely compelling. Stuff has to be picturable. There have to be frequent cuts, just like really, really basic nuts and bolts stuff like that. But that plus the hegemony of three major networks, which is a different situation than the televisual culture of the 90s, which I think a really, when cable and the fourth and fifth networks start popping up, I think a good meditation on that is Bill McKibben's Age of Missing Information, which I'm gonna reread for this series. In that book, McKibben tapes all the TV that is available on his cable system in one day in like 1991, and then he like has to get a bunch of people to help him do this because it's hundreds of channels. It's 24 hours of running your VCR, and then he watches it all. Like he watches all of it, and then he contrasts the kind of knowledge you can get from that, which is like, hey, your aura's fucked up, or your mortgage is probably not as good as it could be, with the knowledge that you could get from walking in the Maine woods where he lives. I think it's Maine. Time. That's a great book, and it pairs really well with Amusing Ourselves. Sure. But anyway, so like the cable landscape, I think, is better covered in that book in certain ways. But so this broadcast that Postman is talking about is a kind of it's like the three network hegemony culture that I just barely remember from my childhood, and he just describes this bizarre conversation in which, like, William F. Buckley, Henry Kissinger, and a bunch of other guys you've never heard of talk past each other for 45 minutes about nuclear war. And like, what he points out is, like, nothing of substance is said, but everybody sort of plays the intellectual in a way that, like, carries through the airwaves really nicely. Henry Kissinger was brilliant at that. He knew that people who watched Walter Cronkite just kind of wanted a vaguely Prussian seeming man to tell them that sober decisions are being taken, that someone is being sober enough about that. And then if you listen to the content of what he's saying, it's all crackpot realism. It's insane and or evil. But you're not supposed to listen to the content. You're supposed to
hear the tone of voice,
it's the vibe. William F. Buckley, same thing. I remember the first time as a kid I saw Buckley on television, and I was a conservative kid. He was supposed to be my guy, and I just found him viscerally upsetting. He reminds me of the head Dalek guy. Your plan is
I kind of recently watched his debate with Baldwin, like way back. This James Baldwin.
Baldwin destroys him.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible to watch. I hate him. I want to punch Buckley so much. He's so annoying and smarmy, and
he's smarmy. Fundamentally, the man was a spy. Like he worked for the CIA.
Yeah,
the preppy spook. There's nothing to him. You cannot believe anything he says. But again, I don't know. Some people that he fits their idea of well, I don't want to think about nuclear deterrence, but I need there to be some pointy heads somewhere who are really thinking about this. And Buckley, I guess, fits that for people. Yeah. He's got a vaguely British accent, so he's serious. But Postman describes this roundtable really well. And the way that there's like nothing of substance happening in it, but the appearance of substance.
Yeah.
Being conjured really well. And like looking back, I mean, Fox came on when I was like 9 or 10, but I vaguely remember the tail end of that era. And it's like, yeah, that is what it was like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think this is really interesting, this chunk. 'Cause there's this performance of, the epistemology of TV that he talks about is, brings about this what he says, like, it's both a new and an old definition of truth, that the credibility of the seeming appearance of credibility of the teller determines the truth of the statement being said.
Aristotelian ethos as defined in the rhetoric, but as done by somebody who didn't do what Aristotle tells you in the rhetoric that you have to do, which is to also go to the lectures on logic.
Yeah. It's just purely about like, how confident does the speaker seem, how beautiful they are, whatever, insert thing. And so this kind of forms into the, what he's really going after in this, the politician as entertainer, the politician as celebrity. And this is where we were getting at, like, you supposedly couldn't have Taft, now because which I don't fully buy that. I think
we do have Taft. We have Donald Trump.
Well, that's kind of what I mean is like, but I think what he was missing there is it's not actually about the beauty as much as like, actually people like Trump looks weird. And that's actually plays well on TV. He's got weird facial expressions. He's got just a unique look to him. He's very distinctive. That's good for TV. It's not necessarily about how, necessarily attractive or not he is.
Yeah, he gives us permission to be the most morally and otherwise slovenly version of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and this also does kind of get into like some of the weaker points too, like this part, because there's a thing that made me just like actually laugh out loud while reading this, where not in the way his jokes do, like in a laughing at him unfortunately way, where he's like, because of his whole premise that we're in Huxley, not Orwell, so there's not going to be censorship problems anymore. It's going to be about the information glut. And he's right about pointing out the information glut problem, which we'll get back to that. But like this like lack of censorship, he's like, book bannings aren't going to be an issue anymore. And I'm like, that is one of the most defining political things of the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's a big thing to get wrong, man.
It's pretty bad. Yeah, so I think it's America is 1984 and Brave New World at the same time. I think it's partly just dichotomous thinking. I don't know. Our society is, and probably any society, is big and complex enough that things that seem incompatible can both be true of it, like pretty trivially easily at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it is true that like we live in Huxley land. Like too many of our educators, and this includes a lot of people on the sort of softer dim side too, want to reduce education to like these discrete cognitive skills that will give us an edge in a 21st century marketplace. Ooh, yeah.
And like they're kind of anti-humanists, and they're contributing to a kind of Huxley world situation where the books exist, but like not enough people read them. People don't think to read them.
Yeah.
People voluntarily disequip themselves to reading them. I remember, like I'm a pretty obsessive reader, and even I had to like claw back some of my attention after the first couple of years on Twitter. And I don't think that was just the magical media ecological effects of Twitter. I think it was also, which is a website that, you know, praise Jesus, I am free from.
Yeah.
But
I've been taking Lent off for it, and it's been lovely.
I nuked mine because the thing where Musk unbanned the guy who had posted
child porn,
images of child sexual abuse material. I don't know, something about that just freaked me out so profoundly that I've never been able to log back in.
No, it was
like I had seen a ghost. It scared me on a metaphysical level. But yeah, like I had to claw back my attention like very, very consciously after like the first couple of years on there. And you know, some of that was like stuff that was personally going on, and not just the media ecological effects, but it was also the media ecological stuff. So the Huxley part of it is that, you know, I got myself a you know, login on a microblogging site and proceeded to give myself brain damage for several years. You know, that's the Huxley part of it. But the Orwell part of it is like, yeah, there's like literal book banning happening. My university is gonna like run through and scrub the words. Like if you say diversity, equity, and inclusion together on a website, they're gonna make you, apparently they're gonna go through and try and make you take it down because we're, you know, capitulating to Trump's little orders, which makes me want to very quickly self-publish a book called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and just put it on my my faculty webpage, just to be like meaningless kind of a fuck you. It's so funny that those three words specifically are like actually like institutionally like getting suppressed. It's like Candyman. Like if you say Candyman, Candyman, Candyman into the mirror, the Candyman will get you. And if you say diversity, equity, and inclusion together as a federal employee or at a university that is run by, you know, cowards and poltroons, then, you know, the boogeyman Mary, what's her name, jumps through the mirror and kills you.
I think maybe Postman didn't see the Orwellian aspects of where we're at coming. Maybe it's almost a degree that he wasn't being like Marxist enough, in a sense that like if the state of our culture of you know, produced by the economic system or whatever kind of creates this Huxley thing, right? Eventually, if that grows, it's going to capture the state, and then the state knows how to do things via repression. That's kind of the you know, the state is kind of ham-fisted in that way. What it does is suppression. And so I don't know to what extent it's like,
we could even make this a media ecological point and say that the form of the state, when you run certain content, when you try to express certain content through the state, the form of
the state is violent suppression. Yeah.
Gosh.
Because that is if we take that kind of like literal, like maybe more anarchist point that the state is the monopoly on violence, that's what it does, you know?
Yeah.
It censors and it arrests. That's what it knows how to do.
Yeah. It also it used to know how to like ship large amounts of like the rice or whatever that you give people who've been in acute starvation.
Yeah, it did at one point.
It did that like up to like a couple of months ago, and so
so
as true as that is, I also, you know, I can't be as mad at the state as I used to be.
No, I
but no, like in terms of positioning Postman politically, he's definitely, I mean, I guess he's a small c conservative political liberal who takes Marx seriously, but isn't a Marxist.
Yeah, I think that would be,
Which,
absolutely.
I mean, I would say I'm further left than him simply in that I just think capitalism is always going to be, it's going to put too much power in private hands, period. if the means of production can be privately owned. I think you have a default king. So I'm not a doctrinaire Marxist, but I end up being well to Postman's left just on that basis.
Yeah, because there's this chunk in, I think it's in Amusing Ourselves to Death, where I think it's when he talks about advertising. He talks about how advertising undermines the logic of capitalism, because capitalism, in theory, in its theoretical form, I'm going
to make a rational calculation about what products I want to buy.
As like marketing supposedly undermines it. Yeah, because it makes appeals to emotions.
That's not how capitalism has ever worked.
That's what I was thinking. Is like I don't think I fully buy that like Enlightenment rational agent worldview ever.
The idea that was one of the first ways that I kind of started, in my opinion, seeing through, or in my father's opinion, falling away from the clear truth of the kind of more conservative economic views that I was raised with is like, who are these people who are doing enlightened self-interest? Like,
where is this at? Yeah.
Where are they? Who are they? Nobody is making, and like, that's even more so true now. Like, when I was a kid, the people who were doing enlightened self-interest were the government bureaucrats who were making it impossible to buy the hairspray that was making the ozone hole bigger. Like,
right.
The only people who could make the kinds of decisions that, according to people who want to defend capitalism, business leaders are positioned to make and are going to make, if you just get the government out of their way. The only people who ever make those decisions, who ever make those calls, who ever see further ahead than next week are the bureaucrats. Those are the bureaucrats and the activists, and like the ordinary citizens who are working usually through the state, because what the hell else are you going to use except machine guns, which we don't have enough of. And it probably wouldn't be great if we did, to restrain private actors who only, like, capitalism is a system for like deranging people's capacity to make long-term self-interest, whatever. I mean, one thing that I do think is interesting about his passage about advertising is that he does put his finger on something that comes up in that Dan Davies book about accountability sinks, that the unaccountability machine, or the unaccountability trap, or something like it, came out last year. It's him trying to bring back cybernetics.
Cool.
It's an interesting book. It's a really book, but he talks about how classical capitalist theory has no room for advertising. There's like no theory of why advertising can work, whereas like, cybernetics and Keynesianism and Galbraithian economics, like, they totally have room for advertising. Advertising is part of how planning works. Corporations plan the economy, because who the hell else is gonna? And nobody really wants an unplanned economy, because because I've seen the movie Mad Max, and that doesn't look like a fun way to live. right?
Yeah.
Nobody really wants an unplanned economy, because we tried that in the Gilded Age, and it led to like in that period before the Gilded Age, and it led to like economic crises every time somebody sneezed. So I mean, planning is going to happen, and if the people don't kind of plan in a loose way via the government, then corporations take up the slack, and part of how they plan is advertising. We need to move something like this many billion units of the new phone, so we better tell people that the new phone is coming.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. Oh man, there's a bunch of different directions to go here.
That's the thing. I mean, I've complained about certain things about Postman, but this is still just a stone cold classic and absolutely worth reading.
Yeah. Oh, kind of going back to the debate thing, something I had noted, like the political debate part, was I think that Postman might have called a problem we see a lot among Democrats now, which was like kind of the popularism thing of never really holding a position, but kind of like, trying to, hump the zeitgeist constantly, kind of going after the polling or whatever. I mean, Technopoly, he like directly calls out like polling as a problem. But like in this one, he kind of gets at that where, okay, the commentators after the political debate are never talking about the substance of arguments. They're always talking about how someone presents themselves and how confident they seemed or whatever. And I mean, this is it, right? This is how all pundits never know how to talk about what they actually believe. They talk about what they think this elusive voter they've made up in their head would react to this statement by, with.
Yeah, no, it's so maddening. Yeah, I'm not even sure I have any analysis to add to that. That just seems like a obviously objectively true statement that is confirmed for me every time I turn on television or go on the internet. And I mean, I do think it's really striking how much not only are the handful of Democratic politicians who mostly escape the absolute toxicity of the Democratic brand, they're mostly people who clearly stand for stuff and will say so and aren't afraid to piss someone off. And not only Bernie, AOC, Ed Markey, Warren, Rashida Tlaib, not only are these the people who escape that, but what's really interesting is at least some of the polling that I've seen. I've seen people use polling to make the argument that like, actually people will call those folks moderate.
Yeah.
And it's not because they are. I mean, these are generally the least moderate people in the Democratic Party. And boy, do I intend that as a compliment. But people who, I don't know. Yeah. People assume that moderation is good. And so they just attribute that to the Democrats that they think are good. And the Democrats that they think are good are the ones who have a fucking backbone ever about anything. Well, and also, I mean, maybe to put a more charitable construction on those findings, if indeed they are real and replicable, I think a person who will just stand up there and say what they think and kind of trace it back to first principles in an accessible, human way, which, AOC will just get on Instagram and say why she thinks what she thinks. But I think when voters see you actually doing reasoning, even if where you end up is like, objectively not moderate in terms of the American political spectrum, they see that and they kind of go, oh, that's a reasonable person, because they're literally reasoning. And the Democrats who try to just sort of follow the polls at 20 paces, they don't do any reasoning because they're reaching their positions not through the use of reason. They're reaching their positions through. David Shore says that according to these polls, I have to throw trans people under the bus, and also I'm going to, because I'm a Democrat, I'm going to talk about how I care about regular people and keeping the government out of people's business and not bullying people. And it's like, well, there's a real open contradiction there. You are not, and people can tell that you're a snake.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's, I think that's a good point. Yeah. I think it really does reflect this politician as entertainer, or rather politician as, formed through the television era of like ratings. It's just following the ratings, but with polling. And I mean, that results in like what he gets into with Technopoly of like outsourcing your thinking to a regime of quote unquote experts. Right. And following ratings doesn't even work for entertainment because people got tired of the Marvel universe, man. Like I'm a huge dork who is primally happy to see my action figures fight each other on a huge screen and eat popcorn. Yeah. Like I have the big dumb child consciousness that just wants to see that, and I'm tired of it, because I don't know. Yeah, people like people don't like pure recapitulations of recapitulations of recapitulations either. People get bored. Yeah.
You don't find the thing that will be the next big blockbuster by imitating the last 6 big blockbusters.
Right.
What you probably get from that strategy is one of those things that was clearly supposed to be a big blockbuster, and that it was because you see the t-shirts on sale for like $5 a month after it came out. Which is it's just one of the saddest. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
yeah, no, absolutely.
That was the year we really bet big on. We thought Jack and the Beanstalk was going to be a really big hit, or whatever.
Yeah. The last thing out of Amusing Ourselves to Death that I wanted to bring up, I don't have a good segue to, but I think maybe the lack of segue itself could be a segue, which is the Now This chapter.
Now This
is maybe my one of my favorite parts of the book. Yeah, because I mean, this is one of those ideas that stuck with me the longest after my first read, because it's the one I think you can see on social media as well, which is, so now this is, of course, like, what you say on TV, that is, he's kind of using it to signify the fragmented nature of TV. It's when you go, okay, you saw this news segment, now this, and now it's something completely different.
Mm-hmm. And the emotional flatness and logical surreality that is built into that format, it's a new report from UNWRA shows that this many children will starve to death in Gaza in the next 36 seconds, and photo of a baby with that horrifying bloated stomach from starving to death, looks like ET thing. Now this. And it's a local grandmother has organized a voting drive.
Yeah. And I mean, so like, I think this is one of the thing. He's like, he was on to something that would get so much worse as time goes on, because this was something, around the end of 2023, beginning of 2024, I was thinking a lot, as you mentioned, Gaza, specifically because of that, because that was what my Twitter feed was. And it was fucking with my brain. Is like, okay, here's snuff footage, and then scroll again, and now this is a funny joke about The Simpsons or whatever, right?
Postman is the reason. I'm going to get a little too real here for a second. So, I mean, post one, just to talk about like atrocity footage and the way that it's sort of casually shared online. Postman is the reason that I have all of my settings and my choice of who I follow and my choice of how often I get on, and even my choice of which, everything. Postman is the reason that I set up as much of my media life as possible so that I never see footage of actual human beings dying. Because and that's partly just like the whole medium is the message idea that the way that you receive the content is the actual content you're receiving. Well, what watching people die while you scroll on your phone teaches you to do is to be a bystander, very literally. Is teaching
that's
you
a great point. Yeah,
to stand there and panic fruitlessly, because you can't have no reaction to that. You have a reaction, but it's a violent and fruitless one. That you're never being given, like you are so rarely being given an action to do with it. So like, I can know that genocide is taking place in Gaza. I almost need to receive that information through the kind of cool detachment of print and numbers, because that leaves me the emotional space to decide what I'm going to do. Whereas watching a hospital blow up leaves me with the trauma that definitely not the trauma of actually experiencing it, but the sort of like reflected through 10,000 mirrors trauma of like, it is a little like if you see a bad accident or a bad wipeout or something. It's that level of trauma combined with like and nothing to do with it. I think that I am rewiring my nervous system in an unhealthy way when I don't allow myself to watch atrocity footage. But if I watch somebody get hurt and it's real, and I don't think that increases my consciousness or my empathy. I think it cooks my brain.
Yeah.
Some of the directions I see the left going in the last little while, I think I'm seeing a lot of people reason like they have unprocessed trauma and cooked brains. By that extension, that's also why I don't watch reality TV, even though I do think it's funny. And I don't mean to be super judgy here, because like some people I love watch reality TV shows, and I don't think those people are bad. But I think training myself to derive amusement from a real person genuinely acting a fool and genuinely blowing up their life.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's also why I don't watch pornography.
Right.
Even though I'm a human being and a man, and I would really like to sometimes, it's again, you're mistraining your nervous system to watch a real human being have a real orgasm and have no connection or responsibility with that person. All three things are miseducations of the nervous system. And I think I am so profoundly creeped out by how normalized watching real people have real, genuine, significant moments in their lives, or even their deaths. I think it's terrible that that's become so normalized. And when I would hear about people, Instagram scrolling through the Gaza atrocities and saying, don't look away, watch the snuff video of a little kid, don't look away. I'm like, no, definitely look away. Like, that is your nervous system trying to like save you from cooking your brain for nothing. Like,
yeah, it's not going to make you
that kid
better
by watching him die. You are not going to help that. Like, it bugs me so profoundly. I don't even know what to say about it.
No, and I mean, if we take Postman seriously, it's like, okay, if this medium is by definition a form of entertainment, like whether you feel entertained in that moment, there is something kind of sick about that environment. Like, this medium is still trying to give you the dopamine blip that you get from a tweet or whatever, but
the intensity upgrade. And I don't mean to be like, I'm sure that like 99 out of 100, like, earnest young people who are like reposting atrocity footage from Gaza and being like super moralistic, finger pointy, don't look away, don't you dare not watch this. I'm sure 99 out of 100 of them think they're doing something good, and this is the only thing they can think of to do, because we are a sort of like amused to death society. And if something is important, then you would entertain yourself about it. That's how we mark something as important, even. Like, the sincerity is there. I don't think we have a whole society of little sickos who are watching that stuff and actually enjoying it and pretending otherwise. I don't think it's entertainment in that way, but it does dominate you in the way that every other form of televised entertainment does. And I like, don't absolutely look away and think about what the hell you're going to do. Like,
absolutely.
The other thing that's really fascinating about the Now This chapter, I have two more things to say about that.
Sure.
One is, like, if you think about the sickest and most twisted forms of like 20th century art, they all function on the kind of art that was intended to like do violence to people's minds. Like, I'm thinking of like Luis Buñuel, the great surrealist director, saying that his film the Golden Age was a passionate incitement to murder. Wow, thanks, cool. Yeah, because it's the 1930s and we definitely need more of those. Thanks, buddy. You're a real help, Luis.
I'm not a huge fan of that movie.
No, I'm not either. But I get why it's a big deal,
it's a provocation, I get it, but
yeah, and he's influential. Like, he makes some artists I do like possible, but I mean, a lot of the surrealist stuff that feels like it's like maybe taking the audience into genuinely dangerous places. It's like, here's a nice thing, here's viscera, here's
the emotional whiplash.
Yeah. And knocking you off your feet, not giving you a chance to reestablish context for something, not giving your emotions a chance to keep up. Like, that is how even the most responsible kinds of television news function as a matter of course. Like, it's really funny to me that by the middle of the 20th century, millions of people were engaging in, as a form of like everyday mass information consumption. Like, your grandma was basically doing to herself what, people in the 20s did by going to a Luis Buñuel film and then having a fucking riot about it. And then the movie gets banned for decades and you can't even see it. You like, it's interesting to me that the intentional emotional whiplash of that went mainstream so quickly, simply by rebranding itself as like something, just kind of like reading the newspaper and not as an art form.
Yeah. What makes, there's been a couple examples of this that I come to mind is back when the invasion of Ukraine started, right? There was that kind of the thing that was getting shared around a bunch that I don't remember what news network it was, but it was one that like had this dramatic fade out as they were going to commercial break of the sirens, and then it immediately cut to an Applebee's ad.
And a little bit of chicken fried. Cold beer on a Friday night.
That was like, and a little bit of chicken fried, and it's all like chirpy, and everyone found that incredibly funny, but it was also like something horrifying. Like, I remember, I think the network like apologized and whatever, but like, it's kind of interesting that they apologized because like, yeah, that was such
their whole thing. That's like them apologizing for breathing.
It was just such an apparent and funny example of what we take for granted that it kind of brought it into attention. Like, it comes to mind. There's like two movies that come to mind when I think about this that I think capture this really well. Is have you ever seen WNUF Halloween Special?
No.
It's a really, really fun little movie from like mid 2010s or whatever. It's I did an episode about it, like I think a year or two ago. That was we were kind of arguing it as being one of the best found footage movies because it frames itself as a television thing. So it feels like found footage in the sense it feels like a VHS tape recording of TV in the 80s, and it's like a local news special.
So this is kind of on the I saw the devil.
Oh, TV. Oh, yeah. I haven't seen that one.
I saw the TV Globe. Yeah, I saw the TV Globe. It was a great movie, but that's something different. The devil 70s talk show movie from a little while. Yeah, it's playing on like public access 80s TV is kind of like the look of it. So it's like they're doing a cute Halloween special. They're going to tour a haunted house and then actual horror happens. But one of the things they did was they parodied 80s commercials breaks. So it really does feel like you just put in a tape that was a recording of an hour and a half of TV from the 80s. And so they use that whiplash a lot, like really intentionally, where you see something pretty upsetting and then it cuts to like a corny commercial. I gotta watch this. This is so me coded.
One of my favorite scenes in it is when the horror is happening and the footage has got, the cameraman is like down or whatever. And so they need to put something on the air. So they just replay a segment from earlier. And so it's like a cute, like dentists buying candy from kids around Halloween so they don't eat candy thing while a massacre is happening.
I gotta watch. I'm reading the Wikipedia right now. Parents against partying. Phil's Carpet Warehouse. I've got to watch this right now.
You would love it.
Have you seen Ghostwatch from 1992?
No, I've not.
That is one of the so it's a pretend British news broadcast with like actual British news people, and it's basically like, we're investigating this house where a murderer lived, and genuine, like it starts very silly and it leads into that absolute abject terror really beautifully. I highly recommend it. But
Oh man.
the other thing, just to finish up Postman, I want to say about Now This, and of course the viewers at home can't see this, but my friend, the writer Sorby Richner, who she has a Substack called Misapprehension that you should all subscribe to. She makes this really cool kind of word art, and she one time we were drinking, and I had just like bullied her into reading Postman, and she made me this really beautiful Now This word art.
That's so cool.
I keep on my desk. So shout out to Sorby.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. The other movie that I had in mind was 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance by Michael Haneke. So much more like art housey. But that one is like just fragments of modern life being dehumanizing until somebody commits a murder. But it begins and ends with TV news. And the whiplash of TV news where it's like they're talking about the Bosnian genocide and then they're talking about a scandal with Michael Jackson and that, and they do that. And then you go into the movie, and at the end, after you see the footage of a guy committing a massacre at a bank, then it goes back to, and now here's Michael Jackson.
I've never watched a Haneke movie because, I read that New Yorker profile of him a bunch of years ago where he was like, I like to torture the audience. And I was like, my favorite movie is Salo because it made me want to kill myself for and that is what I try to do. And I was like, oh, well, thank you for warning me. I will not be doing that.
But I understand why people don't like Haneke. Like, he's a guy who hates his audience. Yeah. And I'm totally aware of that, but I find that really appealing for some reason. It's really mean-spirited, a lot of those movies, but I think he taps into a lot of what Postman was thinking about too.
Yeah.
So
you recommend that one? If I'm going to do Haneke, maybe that's the one to, because I'm not watching Funny Games. Okay. I know that just make me feel terrible.
My favorite one also has one of the more upsetting things in it though. So, cause it's got footage of an animal dying. So that would be the heads up I'd give. But Benny's Video is my favorite because it is the most amusing ourselves to death movie. Cause it's a kid who is watching footage like that over and over and then committing a murder. And it's about him slowly kind of getting detached from reality. And it's one of those movies I don't really recommend to people, but I would say there's a lot of really good ideas in it.
I appreciate it. Yeah. like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2. Can I in good conscience recommend them? No, but sometimes my anxiety builds up and I just need somebody to take a pot scour to my brain. Those films do that.
I'm making a short video essay that I hope to have out in a few days about Benny's Video. So I hope I can get the ideas out there without making me watch an animal die and sit there and detrain my nervous system. Yeah.
All this.
But yeah, I think that's about all I have for Postman. I guess, okay, one kind of big-ish question to wrap up with is, to what degree does social media and the internet both like back up Postman's thesis, and what degree does it change it? Because I think there's like ways in which social media does not quite function like TV. There's a more dialogue format to a lot of social media that isn't the like McLuhan monologue thing as much.
Yeah. There's a really good episode of Relentless Picnic, which I, even though they never post new episodes, I still think is the greatest podcast of all time. And I hope they keep producing stuff even at like increasingly long intervals. If that's what I'm going to be devastated if they ever quit. But where they talk about this, and I think they talk about it in the context of George Tro, who is another writer who fits under the media ecology umbrella. He did in the context of No Context, which is an amazing book. But they kind of talk about has social media displaced televisual ways of knowing, and I remember one of the Picnic guys, I think Adam Juskowicz, makes a very strong. It seems more like of an intuitive claim as I remember it, but I feel like television is still like the medium, that everything is revolving around television. And I think about that remark a lot. I mean, everything is not revolving around television in the sense that like there's not three networks that give us a consensus reality that we can use to like, you know, get our Republican parents to disclaim you know, Nixon when he's bad enough, you know, that we don't have that anymore. There's like George Floyd did not make the murder of George Floyd did not make the big jump to being something even middle American, you know, the most conservative middle Americans felt they had to grapple with until they played that video on Fox News. And at this point, I mean, that was already 5 years ago. At this point, I wonder if now to get our conservative parents to repudiate something, does it have to appear on OAN? Does it have to, does Ben Shapiro have to, I don't know. Does it have to get into the conservative, like online media sphere or doesn't it? I genuinely don't know, but I do think social media, just to sort of like try and flesh out the argument that the Picnic guys were making. It feels like social media wants to become televisual. Like, it feels like, it feels like the ideal social media consumer eventually moves beyond like the type of the Twitter aphorist, for example, that, you know, the person who writes these really clever, maybe somewhat opaque little sentences on Twitter. I feel like that was a big form 10 years ago on like the microblogging sites, like you could be Drill, but eventually that doesn't scale up enough. And eventually Drill has to make a bad Adult Swim TV show that nobody watches. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
or everybody starts a podcast.
Everybody starts a podcast. And I will say, I have a piece on this on my Substack from right after the election where I'm thinking about, you know, what are we going to do? And part of it is like, what are we going to do about the media landscape? I think podcasts are of new media forms. I think everybody makes fun of them, but I actually think they're one of the healthier new media forms.
I mean, obviously I'm biased here, but I agree.
Look, I just had a friendly conversation that's lasted over 2 hours with a guy that otherwise I trade memes and aphorisms with, but we sat down and like really talked. And there's a performative dimension to it because we're being recorded, but I
have notes. I'm trying to guide the conversation. Sure.
Yeah. Right. And I'm trying to like not do the thing I usually do on podcast appearances where my ADHD just keeps it from having any sense of order. It makes it totally unfollowable. Like, so there's a degree of artificiality to it, but it doesn't feel like that artificiality is preventing me from actually feeling like I sat down and talked to my buddy Josiah, you know?
Yeah.
I think there are lots of bad podcasts, you know, Joe Rogan is a podcast, you know,
right.
But I think there are healthier potentialities and more human and humanness enhancing potentialities in the podcast than there are in like the TikTok or even the video essay form. Although I think video essays can be art. I mean, Adam Curtis is basically a video essayist. ContraPoints is a video essayist. She's great, but it's still a monologue. But other than pushing us toward podcasts, it feels like what Blue Sky or Twitter eventually wants you to do is make little videos, make little pictures. I don't know. It feels like everything becomes micro TV after a certain point. Everything pivots to video.
Everything. No, that's a good point. I think, I was like not an answer I expected, but I think it's correct. I think television is still the dominant medium. Yeah. Even though no one we could have nobody watching TV, and yet TV is kind of the medium. We still live in a television culture. It
is maybe the absent father sometimes, but it's the father. That's not good. It's not a good dad. It is Homer Simpson.
It's terrible dad.
Television incarnated as a person is Homer Simpson.
That's right. Well, this has been great. This was a blast. Well, you had mentioned you wanted to plug your new book here and some stuff. So
so my third book comes out from Erdman's in September. It's I'm on the same record label with Karl Barth, baby.
That's awesome.
Jacques Ellul. I'm excited.
Oh man, how have we not mentioned Ellul this whole time? By the way, huge influence.
Well, there's so much to talk about with Postman.
I know.
But I will damn sure be covering Ellul in my series on media ecology that I'm currently running on my Substack, philipchrisman.substack.com.
Check it out.
By the way, if you're one of those people who just like hate Substack as a company so much, I mean, I can give you a very good explanation for why I haven't switched to Ghost, which is basically that it's not these are not identical platforms, and there isn't for a non-famous person, there isn't a real alternative to Substack yet. But I get it if you hate them, especially if you're trans, because they went real big on transphobes right out of the gate. So if you just really, really hate Substack, but you would like to subscribe to the paid version of my newsletter, you should send me an email, and like if you can prove that you like, I don't know, we'll work something out, like you make a donation to a charity I really like that's really big, and I'll comp you for a year or something. I can't do that for everybody, but I can do it for some people. So anyway, right, I have a Substack where I try to post once to twice a week, and I talk about whatever I want. Plus, I also do these series, and the media ecology series is just like, we're still pretty early with that. And my third book, Why Christians Should Be Leftists. I went with the direct approach. Taking some notes from Postman. Just get it right in there. That comes out from Erdman's in September, and pre-orders are already available. And you should just buy the hardcover, because they really did a nice job on the cover. It's a very pretty book. Maybe you won't like it, but it will make like a good like paperweight. So you can't lose.
You can't lose. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been great. Hey, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Hey, at the end of this episode, I briefly mentioned a short video essay about Benny's video that I was working on. That's out now. It's called Everyone Else is an NPC, and you can find it on the Fruitless YouTube channel. So definitely go check that out. But if you liked today's episode, consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps out with the algorithm. And if you really liked the show, consider supporting the show on Patreon. And hey, speaking of that, one of the benefits of supporting this show on Patreon is that you get your name read out at the end of every episode. So without further ado, this episode is brought to you by our lovely patrons, who include Avakai Brodagam, I Drink Corn Syrup, Yum, I Am Once Again, Leo Zachary Dickinson, Philip Cozy, Vita Preva, Attention Francis, Derek Hale, Gavin Aronson, Josh Christensen, Kyle Gannis, Mitchell McKinley, Moss, Nathan Thiessen, Randy Sutton, Regular Size Horse, parentheses, Small, Robert Eilman, Stephen aka Spike Stonehand, The Worst of All Possible Worlds, Vicky Sutton Yeens, and of course, Chris Barker. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and I will see you next time.